This is a starter switch from a 1976 CB550F. This is a repair that most people need to make or have tried to make. This part is the part of the switch that disintegrates over some number of years. In my case, from this switch, it was in enough pieces that we were able to copy it. My neighbor and I, he did a CAD design and we had it 3D printed. And so I'll show you how I fixed my switch for real. When you take the thing apart, you're going to have all these little pieces. You're going to have a couple of springs. There should be a ball bearing. There's some wire hold downs, and most importantly is this rocker piece. I cleaned this up a little bit. I had to put a little bit of solder on the contacts because they were a little bit worn down, but it essentially just pops back and forth between the headlight function and the starter function. So to fix it, this is off the bike, but you can actually do this on the bike. And the first step is, once you get this thing scrubbed clean, I'd use a little bit of contact cleaner, and it just simply, I think the way it works best is I put it straight in at a little bit of an angle. The plastic is flexible, but not terribly flexible, so this will go in a little bit. It'll force the sides apart a little bit. You can get it in like that. Now I've got the back piece mostly seated. A pair of pliers for a blunt tool. Push the front up, snaps in, and you can see both of the squares where the circuit board is being held in place, and you can also see the bottom panel. The squares there are smaller, or they're thinner, so the bottom plate fits in there nicely. This was copied exactly as best we could. The next step is you're going to take your button, and there needs to be a spring, and there's a ball bearing. And what I found the best way to do this, since you're going to be going upside down a little bit with it, is put a little bit of dielectric grease in there, and that will hold the spring. I should make mention, I forgot to mention, that a little bit of dielectric grease on the contacts. The middle piece is a contact as well. That's basically the earth contact. Now I want a little bit of grease here because I want this ball to stay in place. And what this does is, when you push the button in, the ball runs against the bottom of the rocker, and the rocker then touches each of the other contacts, one at a time, of course. So I cleaned this up. I used a little bit of 440 wet or dry, just very lightly. I actually cleaned it up too much the first time, and I had to put a little solder on there because the contacts were worn down from years of use, and then I wore them further by mistake. And you simply drop that in. You have to make sure that it's in its right spot so you can see how it will rock that way. You take your switch. Oh, and the switch needs a spring, a return spring on the back. Turn it upside down. Put that in place. Then the bottom plate. And I put a little bit of dielectric grease on the bottom of the push button so that it slides nicely. That plate simply fits in there like that. Small screwdriver, pry the sides apart, snaps right in. So now the switch is back to how it's supposed to be working. Then it'll be a little harder when you do this on the bike, but it's a lot easier than taking the pieces out of the wires out of the handlebars, I should say. Japanese, a JIS #1 screwdriver. tighten it up. One thing you'll notice about this switch is it has this piece that when the bar gets in here, the bar will rest against this and it'll help hold the switch in place. So it won't be just this individual bolt. There's also a wire hole down here. This one's a little tricky to get when it's on the bike. This is actually not a JIS screw because it's got a punch mark on the top if you look closely, but I'm using the JIS screwdriver. See if this works better. There. So the button's in place, the wire is held in place, and this is ready to be placed back onto handlebars. Now you do have to undo the throttle cables at the carburetors to be able to move the tube out of the way, but that's all there's to it. You're done. You'll have this done in an hour. Okay, so the question is, does this work? I've got my multimeter and it's set to tone. This particular switch has 5 wires that come out of it. We only are concerned with 3. The 2 long ones are for the kill switch. So I've got the black wire, which is the neutral, hooked to the black probe. I have the yellow wire with the red stripe. This is the starter wire. This is when you push the button, this one is engaged. When the button is at rest, like it is now, the black wire with the red stripe is engaged because that's the headlight. Push the button, the headlight goes off, and the starter engages. So when I hook this up, it should have tone immediately. And it should stop as soon as I push the starter button. Now, the yellow signifies the starter. There should be no tone until the button is pushed. And that tests perfectly. So, I have properly fixed the starter button. I know a lot of guys have the same issue, so what I've done is made this piece. It's a 3D printed piece. It's available. The link is at the end of the video. It's also in the above the comments section. The cost is $10 and I think they charge $5 for shipping. So what you end up doing is you order from the 3D printer, they create it and they ship it out directly to you. And if you want to get together with a few other people and buy more than one, I think you won't pay anything extra for the shipping, so that might be the way to go. I hope this solves your problem. Kill it.
Man, working with this guy is hard. I'm sorry I couldn't make his voice any more exciting.